Hey class, this is Mr. Blevins. I just want to show you really quick, this is your 3.3 homework set, and I just want to show you how you can make use of Excel and really get through this homework set pretty quickly. Now, anytime that you have the clickable copy button on your data set, I would make use of it, okay? I'm going to click it and just go ahead and copy this to the clipboard. Open up Excel and paste it in there. Okay, and then the problem asks find the range. Now I can find the range just by looking. Here's 66. The lowest number is 52. So I mean, something like that you can do in your head. So there's a range of 14 here. The sample variance, though, it's a little tougher to find. If you click over here on View an Example, and it's going to show you how to go through and use the formula and find the variance and standard deviation by hand. So instead of going through and doing exactly like all these steps, part by part by part by part, just use Excel. It's completely fine to use Excel. I'm wanting you to learn to use Excel. That's why I even bring it up and show it to you in the videos and things. So the way you do that is after you got your data highlighted, just type in a cell, type the word or type the equal symbol, and then start typing in the variance. Okay, VAR. You see right here, if you click on it, it says estimates variance based on a sample. Now, if you have a newer version of Excel, it may have VARS for variance from the sample, and then VARP for variance of population. But just click on and read what it tells you that it gives you. So this gives me the variance based on a sample. So that's what I want. Okay, and then you just highlight your data. I double click that, highlight my data, I press enter. There's my variance from the sample. So 30.2. Alright, and then sample standard deviation. Go back to Excel, go down to the next block, type in equals, start typing in standard deviation, and then this one, estimate standard deviation based on a sample. So that's the one I want. Again, just read it. It may be different on yours, but usually it's STDEV for standard deviation. Alright, same thing, highlight the data. Make sure you don't highlight this 30.2 because that was the variance. And there's my standard deviation. 5.5, I believe we just wanted tenths. Yeah, so 5.5. Alright, make sure you round it where they tell you to. Even if you round it correctly to the hundredth or the thousandth, it's not to the tenths and they'll count it wrong. Alright, and then identify one reason why the standard deviation for this sample might not be a good estimate of the standard deviation for the population of adults. Alright, if you read these, standard deviation might not be a good estimate because the sample is very small. We only have 5 data points here. So there's our reason why we wouldn't want to use that sample standard deviation to predict the population deviation. Alright, on to the next one. Alright, same thing, I got a data set. It wants to know the range, so I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to Excel, take all the stuff out that I just did, and paste. Alright, and then it's asking for the range, so I can always take the data and order it. You click on sort and filter, sort from smallest to largest. So I got highlighted, now it sorts it. So I can see easily that this is the smallest one. I click it, minus this is the largest, largest and smallest, and there's my range. So you can do that even with Excel. Alright, same thing, sample variance, just go there, equals variance, and then highlight your data. Standard deviation. Data, I'll include the range. So 87.2. Alright, what should be the value of the standard deviation? Well, it's the exact same person, so the blood pressure should be exactly what it is. So assuming they all did it ideally, the standard deviation will be 0. Right? There shouldn't be any deviation from the average. The average should be what they all got, but obviously there was a pretty good bit of variation between them. Alright, same thing. Copy your data, paste it. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and sort it so I can get the range. That's the first thing it's asking me for. And then the range is the largest minus the smallest. 4.26. Variance. VAR. My data. Alright, making sure I don't pick up that range. I'll go ahead and get standard deviation. I figured they're going to ask me that next. Alright, again, don't pick up that range. I'm actually copy that and paste it in here. And I want to run it to 3 places, so that'll be 0.008. Sample standard deviation. This time, they want me to run it to 3 places instead of the 10th, so 0.089. Alright, does the standard deviation serve as a reasonable estimate standard deviation for all fruit flies residing in? Alright, and then again it says all fruit flies residing in that country, and they got it from a particular city, so the estimate's not reasonable because it's obtained from one particular city. Okay, we need to be diverse. If we're going to represent the entire country, we need to get multiple cities, multiple regions. Alright, now we start to get a little bit more difficult problems when we're here. Okay, this is a standard deviation for a frequency distribution, but still, we can copy the data to the clipboard and do the formula on the clipboard. Alright, so I'm going to delete all this and go back up to the first cell, paste it all in there. Alright, and then in this formula, I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'm going to make this a little smaller. In this formula, they tell us that x is the midpoint. So I'm going to write up here midpoint. And the midpoint is equal to the average of the low number and the high number. Okay. And then you can either just do it all the way down, you do need the parentheses when you do that, but you can also make use of the fact that this is 7 more, that we're just adding 7 every time, or you know, it's fine if you just want to do it all the way down, but if you just take previous number and equals that plus 7 equals that plus 7 all the way down, you have your data set. Okay. Alright, you'll have your midpoints. So that's X. I'm just put beside it. That's X. Alright, so that's what that is. Now, notice I need to square the midpoints. Okay, so here I'm going to write X squared. And then here, watch what I do. I type equals. I click this, which represents an X. And then I square it. I'm going to press the caret symbol and 2. And then I'm going to click this cell, highlight that little black box right there. Notice the cursor changes. And when I click it, I drag all the way down to the bottom, or you can just double click it. Okay, I'm going to press Control Z to show you can also just double click that box. And it fills all these in with C3 squared. This is C3 squared, C4 squared, C6 squared. Alright, all the way down. It's just squared the thing that's beside it. Alright, that's X squared that I needed for that formula. Alright, now this says multiply f times x squared. This is f. So if I want to do f times x squared, I press equals, here's f, and I press times, which is the little, looks like an asterisk symbol, and then click that. That's f times x squared in the first row. Hit enter and do the same thing. Highlight the cell again, double click that corner, and it does f times x squared all the way down. Okay, that's in the parentheses. This says I need to add all those up. So it's already highlighted, so I just go up here and press the sum button. And there's that. Okay. Next I need to do f times x. Okay, so I'm just going to press f times x to name the column. F is again the frequencies times x is the midpoints. F is the frequencies times x is the midpoints. Enter. Alright, and I'm going to drag that all the way down. Alright, and then I sum those up. Okay, so there's the sum of f times x. Now, I need to square that to this side. So I'm going to press equals this squared. Okay, and that is sum of f times x. All of that squared. I'm just putting that in there. You don't need to do this obviously in your work. I'm just showing you where everything goes. Okay, so this right here is this. Okay, over here I've got the f times x squared and I've got the sum right there. I need to multiply by n. N is the sum of your frequencies. If I highlight all those frequencies and add them up, that's n. Okay, so I need to take this value and multiply by n. So right here I'm going to write equals n times this value. Okay, and that is that value right there. Okay, and what do I need to do to those? I need to subtract them. Down here, it doesn't matter where, I'm going to write this minus this. Okay, that's the numerator. That's underneath that radical. And then the denominator is n times n minus 1. Well, n is 25. So the denominator is going to be 25 times n minus 1 will be 24. Alright, there's the numerator divided by the denominator, then take the square root. So I'm almost done. Just right here, I'm going to write equals this, click, divided by this. Alright, that's under the radical. And that's also an estimate of the variance. And then finally equals SQRT is square root, and then click there. And there's our estimate of this. So they want us to round it to 1 decimal place, so 9.9. Alright, 5 is the same as 4, so I'm going to skip ahead to 6. Minimum usual value. Something is usual or not unusual if it's within 2 standard deviations of the mean. So what this is asking us to do is find the value that's 2 standard deviations below the mean. Alright, so here's our mean, here's our standard deviation. So I take my calculator and I find out what's 2 deviations below the mean by just typing in the mean, and I subtract 2 times standard deviation. 5.6. Alright, so 1706. Alright, and the maximum, just do the exact same thing, but change the minus to a plus, and you got the maximum. So 3930. Alright, and then is that 1686 unusual? Yes, it's outside of this range. Anything in this range is not unusual. Anything outside is unusual. Alright, so yes, it's smaller than the minimum usual value. Alright, that's how you use the range rule of thumb to determine if something's unusual. Anything 2 standard deviations away from the mean or more is considered, or more than 2 standard deviations away from the mean is considered unusual. Alright, and then this one is an empirical rule. So an empirical rule is sometimes called the 68, 95, 99.7 rule. So 63 and 193, if you take this 78 and you add 5 multiple times, so I take 178 plus 5, that's 1 standard deviation above the mean, right? Plus 5 more, that's 2 standard deviations above the mean, and then plus 5 more, that's 3 standard deviations above the mean. So there's the 3 numbers that are above the mean. And then if I take this 178 and subtract the 3 numbers, or subtract 5 3 times, there's 1 standard deviation below, there's 2 standard deviations below, right, and there's 3 standard deviations below. So this is 3 below, this is 3 above. So that's roughly 99.7 according to the empirical rule. Right? And then this is, if you go back and look, 1 below, right? And then 1 above, so that's 68%. Right, these questions actually are harder when it's like 1 below but 2 above, or 3 below and 1 above. You know, they're not the same on both sides, and you have to use the symmetric properties, and they become a little bit tougher. Okay, if you click on View an Example, it'll still walk you through that, 68, 95, 99.7, but you have to understand what this means, being above so many standard deviations above the mean. Okay, you've got to be able to count in this case 5s. But whatever the standard deviation is, you need to be able to count how many of those things you are above and below the mean, and that'll tell you what percent's trapped in there. Alright, so there's 17 minutes. That's me explaining your homework. I did skip number 5. So using Excel and becoming comfortable with Excel can greatly reduce the amount of time that you spend on the homework set. I know a lot of us are clicking on the View an Example and walking through step by step every single problem along the way. But if you learn Excel, I promise you can get these homework sets, the time you spend these homework sets, cut in half.